The bullet was already in the air before anyone saw her move. In the scorching heart of 1880s Texas, a woman the world dismissed became the only thing standing between life and death. Mara Vance, tracker, outcast, underestimated her entire life, had one shot to prove that strength isn't measured by what others see, but by what burns inside. This is a story of impossible choices, deadly pursuit, and the moment when everything society believed got shattered by a single trigger pull. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The buzzards circled first. Mara Vance spotted them from 2 miles out, black specks wheeling against a sky so pale it looked bleached. She pulled her horse to a stop, squinting through the heat shimmer that made the desert floor look like it was breathing. Nothing good ever waited under buzzards in Texas. She'd learned that when she was 12, finding her father's horse wandering riderless after a Comanche raid. Some lessons carved themselves into your bones. She touched her heels to the mare's flanks and rode toward whatever dead thing the birds had found. The wreckage came into view slowly, like something emerging from underwater. A stagecoach, or what was left of one. The wheels on the left side had collapsed completely, pitching the whole rig onto its side. The door hung open like a broken jaw. Luggage was scattered across 50 yards of calichet and scrub brush, torn open, contents trampled into the dust. A woman's hat box. A leather satchel with papers spilling out, corners already curling in the heat. A child's wooden horse, one leg snapped clean off. No bodies. That was the first thing Mara registered. Plenty of blood, dark stains soaking into the white dust, drag marks leading away from the coach. But no bodies. She dismounted 20 feet out, ground tying her mare with a practiced hand. The horse was a grulla, steady and smart, trained not to spook at the smell of blood. Mara had paid too much for her 3 years back, but she'd never regretted it. Out here, your horse could mean the difference between going home and becoming bones for the buzzards. The heat hit her like a physical thing when she stepped away from the mare's shadow. July in West Texas didn't mess around. Sweat broke across her back immediately, soaking into the heavy canvas shirt she wore. Mara was a big woman, broad through the shoulders and hips, carrying weight that made smaller people assume she was slow. They were wrong. She'd spent 32 years proving them wrong, and she was tired of it, but she'd never stopped. She moved around the wreckage in a careful spiral, reading the ground like some people read newspapers. 4 horses had been hitched to the coach originally. Their traces had been cut, not broken. Clean slices through good leather. That meant whoever hit the stage had wanted the horses intact, probably to sell. The coach itself had bullet holes stitched across the right side, clustered around where the driver would have been sitting. Mara counted 7 shots. Amateur work. Professionals didn't waste ammunition. She knelt beside the largest blood pool, studying it without touching. The blood had started to congeal at the edges, pulling away from the dust in thick strings. 2 hours old, maybe 3, recent enough that the trail would still be readable, old enough that whoever left it had a decent head start. Boot prints everywhere, at least 6 different sets. Men, all of them, judging by the size and depth. They'd milled around after the shooting, searching the wreckage, arguing maybe. One set of prints was deeper than the others, pressed hard into the calichet. Someone heavy, or someone carrying something heavy. Then she found what she'd been looking for. A 7th set of tracks, smaller, lighter, heading west at a dead run. Someone had escaped. Mara straightened, joints popping. Her knees always hurt in the heat. Another thing people assumed about her, that she was too big to move quiet, too slow to keep up. She'd tracked Apache warriors through country that would kill most men, had once followed a horse thief for 6 days through the Guadalupe Mountains in winter, brought him back alive and collected the bounty. People's assumptions weren't her problem. She was studying the runner's trail, calculating how much of a lead they had when she heard hoofbeats. Coming fast. Single rider, pushing hard. Mara's hand dropped to the Colt at her hip, a peacemaker, .45 caliber, worn smooth from use. She didn't draw it, didn't need to yet, but her thumb rested on the hammer, ready. The rider came over the rise at a gallop, his horse already lathered white with sweat. Young man, maybe 25, wearing a dusty black vest over a shirt that had probably been white that morning. His hat was pulled low, but she could see the panic in his face even from a distance. He hauled back on the reins so hard his horse nearly sat down. front hooves digging twin furrows in the dust. "Thank God," he gasped. "Thank God, someone—" He stopped, seeing her clearly for the first time. Something flickered across his face. Not quite disappointment, not quite surprise, just that familiar moment of recalculation people always did when they got a good look at Mara Vance. She let it pass, always did. "Easy," she said. Her voice was low, steady, the kind of voice that gentled spooked horses and calmed frightened people. "Get down before you kill that animal." He dismounted clumsily, stumbling in his hurry. His horse stood with its head down, sides heaving, bad riding. The kind of riding that said this man didn't spend much time in the saddle, or didn't care about the animal under him, or was too scared to think straight. "They took them," he said. "They took them both. We need—" He stopped, pressing his palms against his eyes. Trying to get control. Failing. Mara waited. "People told you more when you didn't rush them." "My name's Colton Reed," he finally managed. "I was traveling with the stage. We were headed to Red Creek, supposed to arrive this morning. Then they came out of nowhere. 6, maybe 7 of them. They shot the driver first, just shot him. Didn't even give him a chance to stop." "Where were you?" Mara asked. "Inside, with Mr. Harrow and his daughter, Eliza." His voice cracked on the name. "The outlaws dragged them out. Mr. Harrow tried to fight, and they hit him, hard. Eliza was screaming. I tried—" He stopped, swallowed. "I had a pistol. I fired twice. Missed both times. One of them shot back. The bullet went through the coach door right past my head. I heard them outside, arguing about what to do with the bodies. With us. So I ran." "Smart," Mara said. He looked at her like she'd slapped him. "I left them." "You stayed. You'd be dead or taken too. Now you're here, and you can help get them back." She turned back to the wreckage. "How long ago?" 3 hours, maybe 4. I hid in a draw about 2 miles back, waited until they were gone. Then I started riding. I hoped I'd find someone in Red Creek, but then I saw you. I'm not from Red Creek." Mara knelt again, studying the tracks more carefully now that she knew what she was looking at. "I'm out of Fort Stockton, freelance tracker." "You track people?" Hope crept into his voice. Desperate hope. "Criminals, mostly, sometimes lost children. Once tracked a mail-order bride who got cold feet and ran off with a whiskey drummer." She glanced up at him. "You got money to pay for my time?" His face fell. No, not much. I'm a ranch hand. Was traveling with the Harrows because Mr. Harrow hired me last month. I've got maybe $20 to my name." Mara stood, brushing dust from her knees. She should walk away. $20 wouldn't cover half a day's work, and chasing outlaws was the kind of job that got you killed if you weren't careful. She had a good thing going in Fort Stockton. Steady work, a reputation, a room at the boarding house where the landlady didn't ask questions and the bed was clean. She should absolutely walk away. "This Eliza," she said instead. "What's she to you?" Colton's face did something complicated. Mr. Harrow brought me on to help around their ranch. She was kind to me. Made me feel like maybe I could be more than just a ranch hand, like maybe—" He stopped. "I care about her. I should have protected her." The weight of should. Mara knew that weight, carried it herself some days. She looked at the sun, calculating hours of daylight left. Looked at the tracks heading north, still visible in the low-angle light. Looked at this kid with his guilt and his useless pistol and his dying horse. "They've got 3, maybe 4 hours on us," she said. "Trail's still fresh, but it won't stay that way. Wind picks up, we lose it. They hit hard ground, we lose it. They split up, we lose it." She met his eyes. "I'm not promising anything except I'll try. And you do exactly what I say, when I say it. No heroics, no stupid plays. You understand?" "Yes. Yes, I understand. Thank you. God, thank you." "Don't thank me yet." Mara walked to her mare, checking the girth strap. "Your horse is done. You're riding double with me until we can get you a fresh mount. There's no time. There's time to do it right or time to fail. Your choice." She swung into the saddle, then held out a hand. "Come on." He grabbed her hand. His palm was soft, uncalloused, and she pulled him up behind her with easy strength. The mare shifted under the extra weight but settled quickly. "Hold on," Mara said, "and try not to fall off." She touched her heels to the mare's sides, and they were moving. The trail headed north into rough country. Mara kept the pace steady, letting the mare find her own rhythm. Behind her, Colton held onto her belt with both hands, his body tense every time the horse navigated around rocks or jumped a small wash. Not a rider. Definitely not a rider. The tracks were clear at first, 7 horses moving at a canter, not trying to hide their trail. Confident. Or stupid. In Mara's experience, outlaws were usually more stupid than confident, but either way, it made them dangerous. "Why north?" Colton asked after 20 minutes of silence. "Red Creek is west. Fort Stockton is south. There's nothing north except badlands and empty country." "But..." "Exactly." Mara pointed to a rocky outcrop on the horizon. "They're heading for the breaks. Country up there is all canyons and dead ends, places where you can disappear if you know the land. Probably got a camp somewhere. Safe place to split up the loot, decide what to do with the hostages." She felt him tense behind her. "What will they do?" "Ransom, most likely. If this Mr. Harrow is worth robbing, he's worth ransoming. They'll send someone to town with demands. Wait for the money to show up." "And if it doesn't?" Mara didn't answer that. They rode for another hour, following the trail as it wound through increasingly broken country. The land rose in long, lazy swells, cut through with arroyos and scattered with boulders the size of houses. Juniper and mesquite clung to the slopes, stubborn and gray-green. The sun hammered down like something with weight. Mara stopped twice to read the trail more carefully, dismounting to study where the tracks crossed patches of hard caliche or rocky ground. Both times, she found what she was looking for: a kicked stone here, a scrape mark there, the subtle signs that horses had passed this way. It was like reading a language most people didn't know existed. "How do you do that?" Colton asked the second time she mounted up. "See things that aren't there? They're there. You just don't know how to look yet." She pointed to a patch of disturbed ground. "See how that dust is sitting? Fluffier than the stuff around it. Something broke the crust. Horse hoof, most likely. And see that prickly pear? Top pad got knocked off. Fresh break. You can still see the green inside. Hasn't oxidized brown yet. I don't see any of that." "You would if you'd spent 20 years looking." Mara clicked her tongue, and the mare started moving again. "My daddy was a scout for the army, taught me to track before I could write my own name. Said reading the land was more important than reading books." "Was he right? Out here?" "Yeah." She paused. "He died when I was 15, tracking party that went bad. But what he taught me stuck." They rode in silence for a while. The land kept rising, getting rougher. In the distance, Mara could see the beginning of the canyon country, red rock walls jutting up like broken teeth, shadows pooling in the cuts and crevasses. Beautiful and deadly. Easy to get lost. Easier to get trapped. "Can I ask you something?" Colton said. "You're going to anyway." "Why'd you help me? You don't know me. Don't know the Harrows. $20 isn't worth risking your life." Mara thought about that. "You ever been underestimated your whole life?" she finally said. "Had people look at you and decide who you are before you open your mouth?" "Sometimes," he said quietly. "I get it every day. Every single day. People see me, they see someone slow, someone soft, someone who can't keep up." She felt anger rising, old and familiar, and pushed it down. "Out here, I don't have to prove anything. The trail doesn't care what I look like. The land doesn't judge. I'm good at this work, better than good. And sometimes that's enough reason to do it." "That's not the whole reason," Colton said. "Smart kid." "No," Mara admitted. "I also really hate men who hurt women." They rode on. The sun was starting to sink, stretching shadows long across the ground, when Mara spotted the first sign that something had changed. She reined in sharply, holding up a hand for silence. Colton went still behind her. The tracks had split. She dismounted, studying the ground carefully. 5 horses continued north, moving at the same steady pace. But 2 had branched off, heading east toward a narrow canyon mouth about a quarter-mile away. "What is it?" Colton whispered. "They split the group." Mara walked forward slowly, reading the story written in dust and stone. 5 kept the prisoners, 2 broke off, sent ahead probably, to scout the camp or check if anyone's following. "Are we in danger?" "We've been in danger since we started," she remounted. "But, yeah, now it's worse. They're being careful. That means they're smarter than I hoped. She studied both trails, weighing options. The main group was still heading north, probably 3 hours ahead now. But those two scouts would loop back eventually, and if they spotted Mara and Colton's trail, the whole thing would turn into a fight. Could she take two men in a gunfight? Maybe. Probably not. She was a decent shot, but she wasn't a gunfighter. Never wanted to be. We follow the five, she decided. Careful now. Eyes open. They moved slower after that, Mara checking their back trail every few minutes. The mare's ears swiveled constantly, listening for sounds that didn't belong. Smart horse. Smarter than most people. The land rose higher, and the walls of the canyon country closed in on both sides. The trail wound through increasingly narrow passages, places where two horses could barely ride abreast. Bad country for an ambush, worse country for an escape. Mara was just starting to think they'd have to stop for the night. Trying to track in darkness was suicide, when she smelled smoke. She reined in immediately. Behind her, Colton tensed. What? Quiet. Mara dismounted, gesturing for him to do the same. She led the mare into a cluster of boulders off the trail, ground tying her in a spot where she'd be hidden from casual view. The smoke smell was faint but unmistakable. Mesquite wood burning. Coming from somewhere ahead, maybe half a mile. Stay here, Mara whispered. Don't move. Don't make noise. If I'm not back in an hour, ride south and don't stop until you hit Fort Stockton. You can't go alone. I can and I will. She met his eyes. This is what I do, Colton. Let me do it. She didn't wait for an answer. Just moved forward, low and quiet, using the rocks and shadows for cover. The canyon narrowed ahead, and the smoke smell grew stronger. Mara moved like water, finding the quiet spaces between stones, placing her feet where sound wouldn't carry. People always assumed someone her size couldn't move quietly. People were idiots. She heard voices before she saw the camp. Male voices, rough and laughing. The clink of a bottle. A horse snorting somewhere close by. Mara eased around a boulder and looked down into a natural bowl in the canyon floor. The camp was small, just a fire and 5 men sitting around it, passing a whiskey bottle. 7 horses were picketed on the far side, heads down, tired. And tied to a juniper tree, sitting with their backs against the trunk, were 2 people. A man in his 50s, gray-haired with blood crusted down the side of his face from a scalp wound. And a young woman, maybe 20, her dress torn, her face pale but defiant. Mr. Harrow and Eliza. Had to be. Mara counted the outlaws again. 5. 2 were missing, the scouts she'd seen break off. That meant 7 total, and she didn't know when the other 2 would be back. She studied the camp layout, calculating angles and distances. The hostages were 20 feet from the fire, tied but not gagged. The horses were another 30 feet beyond that. The outlaws were drunk or getting there, which made them unpredictable. Dangerous. No way she could take 5 men in a straight fight. Not alone. She needed Colton, and she needed a plan that didn't get everyone killed. Mara eased back from her vantage point, moving as carefully as she'd come. It took 15 minutes to work her way back to where she'd left Colton with the horse. He was exactly where she'd told him to stay, holding the mare's reins with white-knuckled hands. "Did you find them?" he whispered. "Found them. They're alive." Mara crouched beside him, quickly sketching the camp layout in the dust with her finger. 5 men, 2 hostages. Camp's in a bowl with only one way in and out. So what do we do? That was the question, wasn't it? Mara looked at the sky. Maybe an hour of good light left, then the long desert twilight, then full dark. The outlaws would probably post a watch, but drunk men made poor sentries. If she waited for full dark, she might be able to sneak in, cut the hostages loose, get them out before anyone noticed. Might. Or one of the outlaws might wake up. Or the scouts might come back. Or Eliza might make a sound at the wrong moment. Or any of 100 things that could go wrong in the dark. "We wait for nightfall," she said. "Then I go in alone, get them out quiet. You stay with the horses, ready to run the second I come back." "That's insane. You'll be outnumbered 5 to 1. "I'll be quiet and invisible. They'll be drunk and loud." She met his eyes. "I've done this before, Colton. Tracked down men who took things that weren't theirs. Sometimes I bring law with me. Sometimes I don't have that luxury. Either way, the job gets done. And if something goes wrong, then you ride hard and don't look back. Tell the law in Fort Stockton where to find the bodies." He stared at her. You're serious? As a bullet. Mara settled back against a rock, making herself comfortable. Now we wait, and we stay quiet. Darkness came slowly, then all at once. The sky burned through shades of orange and red, painting the canyon walls in colors that looked like dried blood. Then the light bled away, and the stars came out hard and bright, like chips of ice scattered across black velvet. Mara waited until full dark, until the only light in the canyon came from the outlaw camp's fire. She could hear them still, laughing and talking, the sounds carrying clearly in the still night air. No watch posted yet. Good. She checked her Colt, making sure every chamber was loaded. Then she pulled out her knife. A Bowie. 10 inches of steel sharpened to a razor edge. She'd had it since she was 16, taken it off a man who tried to rob her on the road to El Paso. He'd assumed she'd be easy prey. He'd been wrong. "I'm going now," she whispered to Colton. "Remember what I said? You hear gunfire, you run." Mara, he caught her arm. "Be careful." She almost smiled. Careful doesn't get the job done, but I'll try not to die. Then she was moving, a shadow among shadows, working her way down into the canyon bowl. The camp was quieter now. Most of the outlaws had bedded down, rolled in blankets near the fire. Only one was still awake, sitting with his back against a saddle, drinking straight from the whiskey bottle. The watch, such as it was. Mara circled wide, staying low, using every rock and bush for cover. The moon hadn't risen yet, just starlight, barely enough to see by. Perfect. She reached the juniper tree where the hostages were tied. They were both asleep or pretending to be. Mara knelt beside them, putting her hand over Eliza's mouth before the woman could react. Eliza's eyes flew open, terrified. "Quiet," Mara breathed directly into her ear. "I'm here to help. Don't make a sound." She felt Eliza nod and removed her hand. Mr. Harrow was awake too, watching with wide eyes. Mara moved to him first, sawing through the ropes, binding his wrists with quick, efficient strokes. Then Eliza's bonds. The whole thing took maybe 30 seconds. "Can you walk?" she whispered to Harrow. He nodded. His head wound looked bad, but he was conscious and moving. That would have to be enough. "Follow me. Step where I step. Make no sound." She led them away from the camp, moving in a wide circle to avoid the sleeping outlaws and the man on watch. 50 feet, 100. The darkness and the juniper cover swallowed them. They were going to make it. Then Eliza stepped on a loose stone, and it clattered down the slope like a bell ringing. Every outlaw was on their feet in seconds, guns drawn, shouting. "Run!" Mara roared. "Run!" They ran. Behind them, the camp erupted in chaos. Men yelling, someone firing blindly into the darkness, horses screaming and pulling at their picket lines. Mara shoved Eliza forward, half carrying Mr. Harrow when he stumbled. They crashed through brush and bounced off rocks, running blind in the darkness. A bullet whined past Mara's ear. Another kicked up dust at her feet. Then they broke out of the canyon bowl, and there was Colton holding the horses, his face white with fear. "Mount up!" Mara shouted. "Now!" She threw Eliza up onto the mare, then Mr. Harrow behind her. Colton was already on his horse. Where the hell had he gotten a horse? Reaching down to pull Mara up. "Took one from their picket line while you were gone," he gasped. "Figured we'd need it." Smart kid. Brave and smart. Mara swung up behind him just as the first outlaw came running out of the canyon, gun blazing. She pulled her Colt, twisted in the saddle, and fired 3 times. Didn't hit anyone, but it made them dive for cover. "Ride!" she screamed. They rode. The pursuit came fast and furious. 5 outlaws on horseback, maybe 200 yards behind and closing. Mara could hear them screaming threats, promising what they'd do when they caught up. The usual outlaw trash talk. She'd heard it before. The problem was they were faster. Fresher horses, lighter loads. The mare was carrying double, struggling with the weight. And Mara didn't know this country, not well enough to navigate in the dark at a gallop. They had to stop. Had to make a stand. "There!" Colton pointed ahead to a cluster of boulders big as houses, forming a natural fortress. "We can hold them off there." Not much choice. Mara nodded. They reached the rocks with maybe a minute to spare. Everyone dismounted in a tumble of limbs and panic. Mara grabbed her rifle from the saddle, a Winchester, .44-40, same caliber as her pistol, and checked the magazine. 12 rounds, plus 6 in the Colt, 18 bullets total, 5 men, bad odds. Colton, can you shoot? I told you, I missed. Can you shoot? Yes or no? Yes. Then take this. She shoved the Winchester into his hands. Don't aim for men. Aim for horses. We drop their mounts, they can't chase us. Understand? He nodded, face grim. Eliza, Mr. Harrow, stay down and stay quiet. The outlaws came thundering up, spreading out as they approached, smart enough not to bunch up and make easy targets. Mara counted them in the starlight. 5, like she'd thought. But where were the other 2, still scouting or coming from another direction? Problem for later. You got nowhere to run, one of the outlaws shouted. She recognized his voice, the one who'd been on watch. Give us back what's ours, and maybe we let you live. Mara didn't answer. Let them wonder. I'm talking to you, woman. I know you can hear me. She sighted down her Colt, waiting. 30 yards. Too far for accurate pistol work in the dark, but if they got closer, they got closer. 20 yards. 15. Mara squeezed the trigger. The muzzle flash lit up the night like lightning, and one of the outlaws screamed and fell from his horse. Not dead, she'd aimed for his leg, but out of the fight. Beside her, Colton fired the Winchester. Missed. Worked the lever, fired again. This time a horse went down thrashing, throwing its rider hard. The other 3 outlaws scattered, diving for cover. Gunfire erupted from 3 directions at once, bullets spanging off the boulders, kicking up dust and rock chips. Mara ducked, waited for a lull, popped up and fired twice more. Heard someone curse, a hit, but not a killing one. This wasn't working. They were pinned down, burning through ammunition, and the outlaws had all night to wait them out or flank them. She needed a different play. Colton, she whispered, give me the rifle. What are you, just do it. He handed it over. Mara checked the magazine. 8 rounds left. When I move, you cover me. Don't try to hit them. Just make them keep their heads down. Move where? But she was already moving, vaulting over the boulder and sprinting left, using the darkness and broken ground for cover. Behind her, Colton started shooting, wild, panicked shots that went nowhere, but they did the job. The outlaws hunched down, returning fire at the rocks where they thought everyone was hiding. Mara circled wide, her boots finding quiet purchase on stone and sand. She counted shots. Colton's Winchester went dry, and he switched to something else, probably a pistol he'd taken off one of the dead outlaws at the stagecoach. Good. She got into position behind the outlaws, 30 feet from the nearest one. He was crouched behind a mesquite bush, reloading his pistol with shaking hands. Mara put the Winchester's barrel against the back of his head. Drop it, she said quietly. He froze. Drop the gun, or I decorate this bush with what's inside your skull. The pistol hit the ground. Now stand up, slow. He stood. Mara relieved him of a second pistol tucked in his belt and a knife in his boot. Call off your friends, she said, or you're the first one dead. You're bluffing. Mara shot him in the foot. He went down screaming, clutching his boot, blood pouring between his fingers. The other outlaws spun around, and Mara had the Winchester up, sighted on the next nearest man. Next one goes through someone's chest, she shouted. Your choice. Drop your guns and ride out, or we stack bodies until dawn. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then one of the outlaws, older, maybe the leader, spat into the dirt. Hell with this. Harrow ain't worth dying over. He holstered his pistol, hands up. We're done. You win, lady. Smart man. Now ride. They rode, collecting their wounded on the way out. Mara watched them go, Winchester never wavering, until the sound of hoofbeats faded into the night. Only then did she lower the rifle and realize her hands were shaking. You shot him, Colton said. He was sitting on a rock staring at Mara like he'd never seen her before. You just shot him. He'll live. Mara was checking the horses, making sure none had taken stray bullets. All fine. Foot wounds hurt like hell, but they're not fatal. You could have killed him. Could have. Didn't. She looked at Colton. Out here, you do what you have to do, not what you want to do. Remember that. Eliza was crying, quiet tears streaming down her face. Mr. Harrow had his arm around her, murmuring something Mara couldn't hear. The old man looked at Mara and nodded once, acknowledgement, respect, gratitude. She nodded back. We need to keep moving, she said. Those men might come back with friends, or the 2 scouts might still be out there. We put miles between us and this place before we stop. Where are we going? Colton asked. Red Creek. It's the closest town, and they'll have a doctor for Mr. Harrow's head. Mara walked to the mare, checking the girth strap. After that, you're all someone else's problem. My job ends when I get you safe. Just like that? Just like that. She swung into the saddle. Come on, we're burning moonlight. They rode through the rest of the night, following the stars south and west. Mara navigated by instinct and memory, finding the paths through the canyon country that wouldn't dead-end or trap them. Behind her, the others followed in exhausted silence. Dawn found them on the edge of the Badlands, looking down at the scatter of buildings that was Red Creek. Smoke rose from chimneys, a rooster crowed, normal life, going on like it always did. Mara stopped on the ridge, looking down at the town. She was bone-tired, filthy, and hungry. Her back ached from hours in the saddle. She wanted a bath, a meal, and about 12 hours of sleep. But first, she had to finish the job. Let's go, she said. They rode into Red Creek just as the town was waking up. The doctor's office smelled like carbolic acid and old blood. Mara stood in the corner, arms crossed, watching as a thin man with wire-rimmed spectacles cleaned the gash on Mr. Harrow's scalp. The old rancher winced but didn't make a sound. Tough bastard. Had to be, to survive what he'd survived. You're lucky, the doctor said, threading a curved needle. Another inch to the left, and we'd be having a very different conversation. Or not having one at all. How long until I can travel? Harrow asked. 2 days, maybe 3. That's if you don't do anything stupid like ride 50 miles or get into another gunfight. The doctor pulled the first stitch tight. What happened out there anyway? Sheriff's been asking questions all morning. Stagecoach robbery, Harrow said. Same story I told him, same story I'll keep telling anyone who asks. The doctor grunted and kept stitching. Mara stepped out into the morning sun, her head pounding from lack of sleep. Red Creek wasn't much of a town, maybe 200 people if you counted, generous, scattered along a single dirt road that optimistically called itself Main Street. General store, saloon, livery stable, the doctor's office where they'd taken Harrow, a hotel that looked like a strong wind would knock it over. She needed coffee and food, and about a week of sleep she wasn't going to get. Colton was sitting on the doctor's porch steps, his head in his hands. He looked up when Mara's shadow fell across him. Is he going to be okay? He asked. Doctor says yes, needs rest. Mara sat down beside him, her knees cracking. Everything hurt. You should get some too. You look like hell. I can't stop seeing it. His voice was quiet, hollow. When they shot the driver, when they dragged Eliza out, I had a gun in my hand, Mara. I had a gun, and I ran. You did the right thing. How? How is running the right thing? Because you're alive to feel bad about it. Mara pulled off her hat, running her fingers through sweat-damp hair. You stayed. You'd be dead. Dead men don't rescue anyone. You made a hard choice in a bad moment. That's all anyone can do. You wouldn't have run. You don't know that. She looked at him. I wasn't there. Maybe I would have run too. Maybe I would have frozen. You don't know what you'll do until the moment comes, and then you do it, and you live with it. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, how do you live with it? One day at a time. Some days better than others. Mara stood, her back protesting. Come on, let's find food before I fall over. The hotel had a dining room that served breakfast until noon. Mara ordered everything they had: eggs, bacon, biscuits, gravy, coffee so strong it could strip paint. Colton picked at his food, but Mara ate like she was being paid for it. Fuel for the body. Nothing more complicated than that. Halfway through her third biscuit, the sheriff walked in. He was older, maybe 60, with a gut that hung over his belt and a face that had seen too much sun. His badge was tarnished, his boots were scuffed, and his eyes were sharp. Mara had known 100 men like him, small-town lawmen who kept the peace because someone had to, not because they believed in justice or righteousness. Just doing a job. You'd be Mara Vance, he said, pulling out a chair without being invited. The tracker. That's right. Name's Wyatt Cole, sheriff of this fine municipality. He signaled the waitress for coffee. Heard an interesting story this morning. Stagecoach robbery, kidnapping, daring rescue, bodies left in the Badlands. You know anything about that? Some, Mara said. Care to elaborate? She told him the story, leaving out the parts that made her look like she'd done anything the law might frown on. Just the facts. Found the wreckage, tracked the outlaws, got the hostages out. Self-defense when they came after her. Cole listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment, drinking his coffee. You kill anyone? He finally asked. Shot one in the foot. Rest rode off under their own power. Witnesses to confirm that? Mr. Harrow, his daughter, Colton here. Cole looked at Colton, who nodded. All right. The sheriff stood. Appreciate you bringing them back alive. Most bounty hunters would have just killed everyone and sorted it out later. I'm a tracker, not a killer. There a difference? I like to think so. Cole almost smiled. Almost. You planning to stay in Red Creek? Long as it takes Mr. Harrow to heal up. Then I'm heading back to Fort Stockton. Good. We're a quiet town. Like to keep it that way. He tipped his hat. You need anything? You let me know. Town owes you a debt. He left. Mara went back to her breakfast. He didn't even say thank you, Colton muttered. Don't need his thanks. Just need him to leave me alone. Mara drained her coffee. Finish eating, then get some sleep. We've got time now. But Colton was looking past her, toward the door. His expression changed, something complicated flickering across his face. Mara turned. Eliza Harrow stood in the doorway. She'd cleaned up since last night. Her hair was brushed, her dress was fresh, and the terror had drained from her face, replaced by something calmer, composed. She walked to their table with her head high. Miss Vance, she said, may I speak with you? Sure, Eliza glanced at Colton. Privately? Colton stood quickly, nearly knocking over his chair. I'll be outside. He left. Eliza took a seat, folding her hands on the table. I want to thank you, she said, for what you did. My father told me everything, how you tracked us, how you got us out, how you faced down 5 armed men without hesitation. She paused. You saved our lives. It's what I do. It's more than that. Eliza's voice was steady, but there was weight behind it. When those men took us, I thought we were going to die. I was certain of it. Then you appeared out of nowhere, and suddenly dying wasn't inevitable anymore. You gave me hope when I had none. Mara didn't know what to say to that. She'd never been good with gratitude. It always felt unearned, even when she'd earned it. Your father's tough, she finally said. He'd have found a way out. Maybe. Or maybe we'd both be dead. Eliza leaned forward. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Those men, the ones who took us, will they come back? Hard to say. Depends how angry they are, how stupid they are, and whether they think you're worth the trouble. Mara met her eyes. But honestly, probably not. They're outlaws, not soldiers. They don't hold grudges when it costs them. Easier to find new targets than chase old ones. That's what I thought. Eliza relaxed slightly. My father wants to hire guards, extra men to protect the ranch. He's talking about fortifying the house, buying more guns. He's scared. Can't blame him. I know, but I also know that fear can make you do things that don't help. That just make you smaller. She looked out the window at the dusty street beyond. I don't want to spend the rest of my life being afraid. I want to learn what you know, how to track, how to survive, how to fight back when someone tries to take what's yours. Mara stared at her. You want me to teach you? Yes. I'm leaving in 2 days. Then teach me what you can in 2 days, please. There was something in Eliza's voice, not desperation, but determination. The kind of steel that came from surviving something terrible and deciding never to be that helpless again. Mara recognized it, saw it in the mirror sometimes. All right, she said, meet me at the livery after lunch. Bring boots you don't mind ruining. Eliza smiled. It was the first real smile Mara had seen on her face. Thank you. She left. A moment later, Colton came back in, trying to look casual and failing completely. What did she want? He asked. Lessons. In what? Staying alive. Mara stood, tossing coins on the table for the meal. You coming, or you going to stand there looking lost all day? He followed her out into the heat. The next 2 days passed in a blur of activity and exhaustion. Mara spent the mornings with Eliza, teaching her the basics of tracking, how to read disturbed ground, how to tell fresh tracks from old ones, how to follow a trail when it crossed hard rock or running water. Eliza was a fast learner, asked good questions, didn't complain about the heat or the walking, paid attention to details. In another life, she might have made a decent tracker herself. The afternoons, Mara spent sleeping, or trying to. Her body was beat to hell from the chase and the fight, and every muscle screamed when she moved. She wasn't as young as she used to be, wasn't as resilient, took longer to bounce back now. The evenings she spent with Colton. He'd attached himself to her like a lost dog, following her around town, asking questions, trying to be useful. At first it annoyed her, then she realized he didn't have anywhere else to go. He'd been hired as a ranch hand, but Harrow wasn't going back to the ranch for at least a week, maybe longer. So Colton was stuck in Red Creek with nothing to do and no one to talk to except Mara. On the second evening, they were sitting outside the hotel, watching the sun sink behind the western hills. The sky was doing that thing it did in summer, turning colors that didn't seem real, purple and orange and deep red, like a bruise ripening. "Can I ask you something personal?" Colton said. Mara sighed. "You're going to anyway. How'd you get into this work? Tracking, I mean. Told you already. My father taught me." "Yeah, but why keep doing it? After he died, you could have done anything. Why this?" Mara thought about that. Nobody had ever asked her that question before. Or if they had, she'd brushed it off. "Because I'm good at it," she said slowly. "And because it's one of the few things where being a woman doesn't matter. The trail doesn't care if I'm male or female. Doesn't care if I'm pretty or ugly, skinny or heavy. It just is, and I just read it. No judgment, no assumptions. People judge you a lot, don't they?" "Every day." She paused. "You know what the worst part is? Not the judgment itself. It's that I know they're wrong, but I still have to prove it, every single time. Like what I did yesterday doesn't count today. Like I'm starting from zero with every new person I meet. That must be exhausting." "It is." Mara looked at him. "What about you? Why were you working for Harrow?" Colton was quiet for a long moment. "I was drifting. Had been for a couple of years. Worked a ranch in New Mexico, got fired for talking back to the foreman. Worked another one in Colorado, lasted 6 months before they sold the cattle and let everyone go. Ended up in Texas because I heard there was work, and Harrow hired me on site. First person who didn't ask 100 questions or want references I didn't have. And Eliza?" His face did that complicated thing again. "She was kind to me. First week I was there, I got kicked by a horse. My own stupid fault. Walked behind it without announcing myself. Eliza patched me up, brought me food while I was laid up. Talked to me like I was a person, not just hired help. I guess I thought that meant something." "Did it?" "I don't know anymore." He picked at a splinter in the porch railing. "When they took her, all I could think was that I had to save her. Had to be the hero. But I wasn't, you were. And now when I look at her, all I see is my own failure. That's not fair to either of you." "Maybe not, but it's true." They sat in silence as the sky darkened and the first stars appeared. Somewhere down the street, someone was playing a fiddle badly. A dog barked. Normal life carrying on like it always did. "What happens after this?" Colton finally asked. "After Harrow heals up and you go back to Fort Stockton?" "I find my next job, track down whoever needs tracking, get paid, keep going." "That's it? That's the whole plan?" "That's the whole plan." "Sounds lonely." Mara didn't answer that, because it was. On the morning of the third day, Mara was saddling her mare when Harrow found her. He looked better. The bandage on his head was smaller, and he moved without the careful stiffness of someone in pain. Still not 100%, but getting there. "Leaving already?" he asked. "Job's done. You're safe. Sheriff knows what happened. No reason to stick around." "I was hoping we could talk first." Harrow leaned against the stable door. "About payment. I told Colton $20. That's what I'm owed." $20 is an insult for what you did. You risked your life. Tracked us through country that would have killed most men. Faced down armed outlaws without backup. Got us out alive. He pulled out a leather wallet, thick with bills. "I'm offering you $500. Mara stopped tightening the cinch. "That's too much." It's not nearly enough, but it's what I can afford right now. He held out the money. Take it, please. Let me at least pay you what you're worth. She looked at the money. $500 was more than she made in 6 months of tracking work. It was enough to buy a new horse, new gear, maybe even put some away for when she got too old to do this work anymore. She took it. Thank you, she said quietly. Thank you. Harrow pocketed the wallet. If you're ever in this part of Texas again, you're welcome at my ranch. Doors always open. Appreciate that. He nodded and walked away. Mara tucked the money into her saddlebag, feeling its weight. It didn't make the loneliness go away, but it helped. A little. She was leading the mare out of the stable when Eliza appeared, slightly out of breath like she'd been running. I thought you'd left already, she said. Just heading out now. I wanted to give you this. Eliza held out a small leather-bound book. It's blank. For notes or drawings or whatever you want. I know you probably don't have much use for it, but I wanted you to have something to remember us by. Mara took the book. It was well made, the leather soft and supple, the pages clean and white. The kind of thing she'd never buy for herself because it seemed frivolous. Thank you, she said. No, thank you. For everything. Eliza hesitated, then stepped forward and hugged her. Mara stood rigid for a moment, not sure what to do. She wasn't a hugger, didn't know how to be. But then she put her arms around Eliza and squeezed back just once. When they separated, Eliza was crying a little. The things you taught me. I won't forget them. Any of them. Good. Stay sharp out there. I will. Eliza left. Mara stood there holding the book, feeling something complicated in her chest. Gratitude, maybe. Or the bitter knowledge that in a week, Eliza would go back to her life and forget all about the big woman who'd pulled her out of hell. People always did. She shoved the book in her saddlebag next to the money and mounted up. Colton was waiting at the edge of town. He was sitting on his horse, the one they'd stolen from the outlaws, which the sheriff had let him keep, wearing the same dusty clothes he'd been wearing when Mara first met him. But something about him was different. He sat straighter in the saddle, looked more settled. Thought you'd try to leave without saying goodbye, he said when Mara rode up. Thought about it. Mind if I ride with you, at least part of the way? Mara wanted to say yes, wanted to tell him to go back to the Harrow Ranch, earn his wages, build a life. But she looked at him and saw someone who didn't fit anywhere yet, someone still figuring out who they were. You can ride as far as the fork, she said. After that, you're on your own. Fair enough. They rode out of Red Creek together, heading south into empty country. The land opened up as they traveled. Less canyon, more plain, with the Guadalupe Mountains rising purple and hazy in the distance. The heat was brutal, but there was a wind blowing that made it bearable. Almost pleasant. They didn't talk much. There wasn't much to say. But the silence was comfortable, companionable. Two people who'd been through something together and didn't need words to acknowledge it. Around midday, they stopped to water the horses at a creek that cut through the landscape like a wound. Mara knelt beside the water, splashing it on her face and neck. It was warm but clean, tasting faintly of minerals. Can I ask you something? Colton said, watering his horse upstream. You always ask if you can ask. Just ask. Do you ever get tired of being alone? Mara was quiet for a moment. Sometimes. But being alone is better than being with people who make you feel small. I learned that early. What if you found people who didn't make you feel small? Haven't found any yet. You sure about that? She looked at him. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not pity, not admiration, something else. Something that made her chest tighten. We should keep moving, she said, standing up. Burn daylight standing here. They rode on. The fork came sooner than Mara expected. A place where the trail split, one branch heading southwest toward Fort Stockton, the other northwest toward ranch country and whatever life Colton was building for himself. They reined in at the split. The sun was starting to sink, painting the world in shades of gold and amber. This is where we part ways, Mara said. I know. Colton didn't move. I've been thinking about what you said, about finding the next job, tracking the next person, getting paid, keeping going. That doesn't sound like much of a life. It's the life I've got. What if it didn't have to be? He turned his horse to face her directly. What if you came with me to the Harrow Ranch? They're hiring, Mara. They need good people, And after what you did, Harrow would hire you in a second. I'm not a ranch hand. You could be anything you wanted. Tracker, scout, security. Hell, just someone who knows how to survive in country that eats people alive. He leaned forward. You said people make you feel small. I'm not trying to do that. I'm saying you don't have to be alone anymore. Not if you don't want to be. Mara felt something crack inside her. Not breaking. Opening. For 3 years she had ridden from town to town, taking jobs that paid just enough to keep her moving. She told herself she liked it that way. Liked the freedom. Liked not answering to anyone. But sitting here in the fading light, looking at this kid who'd gone from useless to capable in the span of 3 days, she realized something. She was tired. Tired of sleeping in strange beds. Tired of proving herself over and over. Tired of the loneliness that came from never staying anywhere long enough to matter to anyone. I don't know how to do this, she said quietly. Be part of something. Stay put. I've never been good at it. Neither have I, Colton smiled. We can figure it out together. She looked southwest toward Fort Stockton and the life she knew. Then she looked northwest toward something unknown. All right, she said. I'll try it. For a while. His smile got wider. Yeah? Yeah. But I'm not making any promises. I don't like it. I leave. Understood. Understood. They turned their horses northwest and rode toward the mountains, toward whatever came next. The sun sank lower, stretching their shadows long across the ground. Somewhere behind them, Red Creek was settling in for the night. Somewhere ahead, a ranch and a new life waited. Mara didn't know if this was the right choice. Didn't know if she'd last a week or a year or the rest of her life in one place. But for the first time in a long time, she was willing to find out. The land rolled on, endless and indifferent. The horses walked steady. And Mara Vance, tracker and outcast, let herself believe just for a moment that maybe being alone wasn't the only way to be strong. The Harrow Ranch sprawled across 3,000 acres of land that didn't want to be ranched. Mara saw it first from the ridge overlooking the valley, a collection of buildings huddled together like they were trying to stay warm. Main house built from adobe and timber, barn that leaned slightly to the east, bunkhouse for the hands, corrals that needed mending. Beyond that, rolling grassland dotted with cattle, and beyond that, nothing but sky and distance. It looked like hard work, the kind of place that demanded everything you had and gave back just enough to keep you breathing. Colton pulled his horse up beside hers. Not much to look at, is it? I've seen worse. Yeah, but you've also seen better. That was true. But Mara had learned a long time ago that better wasn't always what mattered. Sometimes you just needed a place that would have you. They rode down into the valley as afternoon light slanted gold across the grass. A dog started barking when they were still 100 yards out, big yellow mutt that came running full tilt, tail wagging so hard its whole back end moved. It circled the horses, sniffing and jumping, before racing back toward the house. A man stepped out onto the porch. Not Harrow. Younger, maybe 40, with arms like fence posts and a face weathered by sun and wind. He watched them approach with the careful, neutral expression of someone who'd learned not to assume anything about strangers. "Help you folks?" he called out. "Looking for Mr. Harrow," Colton said, dismounting. "Is he around?" "Depends who's asking." "Colton Reed, I work here, or did, before—" He gestured vaguely. "It's been a week." The man's expression shifted. "Reed, right. The boss said you might be coming back." His eyes moved to Mara. "And you'd be the tracker. Mara Vance. That's right? Name's Pike, foreman." He came down off the porch, moving with the rolling gait of someone whose knees had given up arguing with gravity. "Boss is inside, been waiting for you both." They tied off their horses and followed Pike into the house. Inside was cooler, dim after the bright sunlight. The main room was simple. Wooden floors, heavy furniture that had seen decades of use, a stone fireplace big enough to roast a whole steer. Harrow was sitting in a chair by the window, his daughter standing beside him. The bandage was gone from his head, replaced by a livid scar that ran from his hairline to just above his left eye. He stood when they entered, moving stiff but steady. "Colton, Miss Vance." He nodded to each of them. "Glad you made it. Was starting to think you'd changed your minds." "Took longer than expected," Mara said. "Trail was rough. Always is out here." Harrow gestured to chairs. "Sit. Pike, get them water. They look half dead." Pike disappeared into what was probably a kitchen. Mara sat, feeling every mile of the ride in her bones. Beside her, Colton perched on the edge of his chair like he might need to run. "So," Harrow said, settling back into his own chair, "I assume Colton told you about my offer?" "He said you were hiring." "Didn't mention specifics." "Specifics are simple. I need someone who knows this country. Someone who can track, scout, read signs that most people miss. Someone who can teach my hands how to survive out there instead of just getting by." He paused. "I also need someone I can trust. After what happened on that stage, I don't trust easily anymore. But I trust you. You barely know me. I know you tracked 7 armed men through country that would kill most people. I know you got me and my daughter out alive when you had no reason to risk yourself. That tells me enough." He leaned forward. "I'm offering you a job, Miss Vance, not as a ranch hand, as head of security. You'd teach the men, scout the land, keep us safe from whatever comes next. Pay us $60 a month, plus room and board." $60 was good money. More than good. It was the kind of money that meant stability, security, a future that didn't involve sleeping in boarding houses and eating whatever was cheap. "I'm not good with people," Mara said. "Never have been. You put me in charge of your hands, there's going to be friction." "I'm counting on it." Harrow smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Most of them are soft. Good men, but soft. They need someone to toughen them up, make them sharp." Pike returned with water in tin cups. Mara drained hers in 3 long swallows, feeling the coolness spread through her chest. "I'll need my own space," she said. "Not the bunkhouse. Somewhere separate. There's a line shack about a mile north, small, but it's got a roof and walls. Used to house the previous foreman before he moved on. It's yours if you want it. And I work alone. No one looking over my shoulder, questioning my methods." Agreed. Mara looked at Eliza, who'd been quiet this whole time. The young woman met her gaze steadily, and Mara saw something there she recognized, a hardness that hadn't been there before. The kidnapping had changed her, changed them all. "All right," Mara said. "I'll take the job, but I'm not making promises about how long I'll stay." "Fair enough." Harrow extended his hand. "Welcome to the Double H Ranch." They shook. His grip was firm, his palm calloused. A working man's hand, even if he owned the place. The line shack was exactly what Harrow had promised. Small, isolated, and barely standing. Mara moved in the next morning, bringing everything she owned in 2 saddlebags and a bedroll. The shack was maybe 12 feet square, with a narrow bunk built into one wall, a potbelly stove in the corner, and a single window facing south. The roof leaked in 2 places. The door hung crooked. Mice had been using the place as a hotel. She spent the first day cleaning, sweeping out mouse droppings, patching the roof with tar paper she found in the barn, rehinging the door so it actually closed. By sunset, the place looked almost livable. By the time she fell into the bunk that night, she was too tired to care about anything except sleep. The work started the next morning. Harrow had 6 hands working the ranch full-time, plus another 3 or 4 who came and went depending on the season. Mara met them all at dawn in the yard outside the bunkhouse. They stood in a rough line, watching her with expressions that ranged from curious to skeptical to outright hostile. Pike did the introductions. "This is Mara Vance. She's your new security chief. What she says goes. Anyone has a problem with that? Take it up with Mr. Harrow." One of the hands, a kid no older than 20 with a patchy beard and too much confidence, stepped forward. "No disrespect, ma'am, but what's a woman going to teach us about security?" "How not to die," Mara said flatly. "Interested?" That got a few laughs. The kid's face reddened, but he stepped back. "Here's how this works," Mara continued. "I'm going to teach you 3 things. How to read the land, how to stay alive in country that wants you dead, and how to fight when you have to. You pay attention, you learn. You don't, you wash out. Simple." "When do we start?" another hand asked. This one was older, gray-haired, with eyes that had seen things. "Now." Mara pointed north, toward the broken country beyond the ranch. "We're going for a walk. Bring water. Don't bring anything else." They walked for 6 hours. Mara led them through gullies and over ridges, across caliche flats and through mesquite thickets. She showed them how to read tracks, not just what made them, but when and where the animal or person was going. She taught them to notice the small things, bent grass that showed passage, disturbed stones, the way birds scattered when something moved below. By noon, half the men were struggling. By mid-afternoon, 2 had dropped out and headed back. The ones who stayed were drenched in sweat, limping, sunburned, but still moving. The gray-haired hand, his name was Dutch, caught up with Mara during a water break. "You're trying to break us," he said. It wasn't an accusation, just an observation. "I'm trying to see who breaks." Mara took a drink from her canteen. "Out here, tough matters more than smart. I need to know who's tough. And if none of us are, then I teach you to be." Dutch grinned. "I think I'm going to like working with you." "Don't decide yet. We're only getting started." They walked until sunset, then walked back in gathering darkness. By the time they reached the ranch, every man was stumbling. Even Dutch looked ready to collapse. "Tomorrow morning, same time," Mara said. "We do it again, and the day after that, and the day after that, until you can do it without dying." "How long did it take you?" the kid with the patchy beard asked. "I was 12, took 3 months before my father stopped having to carry me the last mile." She looked at each of them in turn. "You've got 2 weeks. After that, we move on to harder things." She walked away, heading for her line shack, leaving them to their exhaustion and their doubts. 3 weeks passed in a blur of sweat and sore muscles and small victories. Mara pushed the ranch hands hard, harder than they'd ever been pushed. She taught them to track at night using only starlight, taught them to move quietly through brush that wanted to announce every step, taught them to shoot from horseback, from behind cover, from positions that made their hands shake and their hearts pound. Some washed out. The kid with the patchy beard lasted 5 days before he quit, claiming the work was beneath him. 2 others followed shortly after, saying they'd hired on to punch cattle, not play soldier. But the ones who stayed got better. Dutch became sharp enough to spot tracks Mara had deliberately tried to hide. A quiet Mexican hand named Ruiz learned to move through the brush like smoke. Even Colton, who'd started as the weakest of the bunch, developed into someone Mara could trust to watch her back. The evenings she spent alone, usually. The ranch hands had their bunkhouse, their cards and whiskey and talk. Mara had her line shack and her silence. Sometimes Colton would walk up after supper, and they'd sit on the step watching the stars come out, not talking much, just being. "You settling in?" he asked one night, about a month after they'd arrived. "As much as I settle anywhere." That's not really an answer. Mara thought about it. The truth was complicated. She liked the work, liked teaching men who wanted to learn, liked seeing them improve, liked knowing she was building something that might last, but she also felt the old restlessness creeping in, the urge to move, to keep writing, to not stay anywhere long enough to be pinned down. "I don't know yet," she finally said. "Ask me in another month." "Fair enough." Colton was quiet for a moment. "Eliza asked about you yesterday." "What about me?" "If you were happy here." I told her I didn't know. She should mind her own business. She cares. That's not a bad thing. Mara didn't answer. Caring made things complicated, made leaving harder. They sat in silence as the sky darkened and the coyotes started singing in the distance. After a while, Colton stood to leave. "For what it's worth," he said, "I'm glad you stayed, even if it's just for now." "Me too," Mara said quietly. "Most days." He walked back toward the bunkhouse, and she was alone again, the way she always ended up. The trouble came on a Tuesday morning in late August. Mara was checking fence line on the eastern edge of the property when she saw the smoke. Just a thin column rising from somewhere beyond the ridge, maybe 2 miles out. Could have been a campfire. Could have been lightning strike. Could have been nothing. She rode toward it anyway. The closer she got, the more wrong it felt. The smoke was too thick for a campfire, too localized for a brush fire. And there was something else, a smell on the wind that made her stomach clench. Burning meat. She crested the ridge and saw it, a homestead, or what was left of one. Small cabin, barn, chicken coop, all burning. The barn was fully engulfed, flames reaching 30 feet into the air. The cabin was half collapsed, smoke pouring from the windows. And in the yard, sprawled face down in the dirt, was a man. Mara dismounted fast, pulling her rifle from the saddle scabbard. She approached low and careful, scanning the area for movement. Nothing. Whoever had done this was gone. The man in the yard wasn't dead yet. She could see his back moving, shallow breaths that came wet and labored. Mara rolled him over gently. He was young, maybe 30, with a bullet hole in his chest that bubbled red every time he exhaled. Lung shot. Fatal, just taking its time. His eyes opened, unfocused and glassy. They came. Who came? Mara asked, already knowing the answer. 7, maybe 8? Blood leaked from the corner of his mouth. Wanted food, water. We didn't have enough. Easy, don't talk. But he kept talking, words coming in broken gasps. Took my wife, my daughter, rode north. You have to. I will. Mara didn't know if that was true, but it was what he needed to hear. He died 30 seconds later, his last breath rattling out like stones in a can. Mara closed his eyes and stood. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, from anger. She'd seen this before. Men who took what they wanted because they could. Men who left bodies and burning homes behind them like it meant nothing. She walked a wide circle around the homestead, reading the ground. 8 horses, like the dying man had said. They'd come from the west, stayed maybe an hour, then headed north. Toward the Badlands, toward the same country where she'd tracked them before. Same group? Maybe. Or maybe just more scum drawn to empty country because empty country didn't have laws. Either way, they had hostages. And they were heading into Mara's territory now. She rode back to the Double H at a gallop. Harrow listened to her report without interrupting. When she finished, his face was granite. How many men do you need? He asked. None. I work better alone. Like hell. That was Colton, standing in the doorway. You're not going after 8 armed men by yourself. I've done it before. Barely. And you almost died. He stepped into the room. I'm coming with you. Me too, Dutch said, appearing behind him. If it's the same bastards who hit the stage, I've got a score to settle. Mara looked at Harrow. He nodded. Take whoever you need, he said. Bring those people back alive if you can. If you can't... He didn't finish. Didn't need to. Mara studied the men in front of her. Colton, who'd proven himself capable but still lacked the cold edge you needed for this work. Dutch, who was steady and smart but old enough that his reflexes had slowed. Ruiz, quiet and quick, but she didn't know yet if he could handle violence when it came. 4 of us, she decided. Light and fast. We leave in 30 minutes. They rode hard, following the trail north into country that got rougher with every mile. The tracks were easy to read at first. 8 horses moving at a canter, not bothering to hide their passage. Confident, arrogant. But as the land rose into broken canyon country, the trail got harder. The outlaws had started being careful, walking their horses over hard rock, doubling back occasionally to confuse anyone following. It didn't work. Mara had been tracking men since before most of these outlaws were born. She found every trick they tried, every false trail and misleading sign. By sunset, she'd cut their lead from 6 hours to maybe 3. They made camp in a hollow that hid their fire from view. No one spoke much. Dutch and Ruiz cleaned their weapons. Colton sat sharpening his knife with long, methodical strokes. Mara studied her mental map of the country ahead, trying to predict where the outlaws would go. You think it's the same ones? Colton asked quietly. Don't know, don't care. Mara poured herself coffee from the pot. They're outlaws. They took hostages, that's all that matters. What if there's too many? What if we can't? Then we do what we can and live with it. She met his eyes. You scared? Yeah. Good. Scared keeps you sharp. Just don't let it make you stupid. They rode before dawn, navigating by starlight through canyons that twisted like intestines. Mara found where the outlaws had camped, still warm ashes, horse droppings that hadn't dried yet. Close. Very close. She signaled the others to dismount and move on foot. The sun was just breaking the horizon when they heard voices. Mara held up a fist, stop, and the group froze. She crept forward alone, moving between boulders until she could see down into a natural bowl in the canyon floor. 8 men, 2 hostages, a woman and a young girl, maybe 10 years old, both tied to a scrubby juniper. The outlaws were breaking camp, moving slow and lazy like they had all the time in the world. Mara counted guns. Every man was armed, most with revolvers, 2 with rifles. Bad odds for a straight fight. She needed an edge. She crawled back to where the others waited and sketched the layout in the dust. We can't take them head on, she whispered. But we don't have to. We spook their horses, create chaos, use the confusion to grab the hostages, and run. What if they chase us? Ruiz asked. Then we make them wish they hadn't. Mara looked at each man in turn. I need someone to circle around, cut their horses loose. Someone quiet. I'll do it, Ruiz said. Good. Dutch, Colton, you're with me. We position ourselves above the camp, high ground. When the horses scatter, we make noise. Make them think there's more of us than there are. Ruiz gets the hostages out during the chaos. What about you? Colton asked. I'll be making sure they're too busy to follow. They moved into position like pieces on a chessboard. Ruiz disappeared toward where the horses were picketed. Mara, Dutch, and Colton climbed to a rocky outcrop that gave them a view of the entire camp and good cover. Mara settled her Winchester against her shoulder and waited. 10 minutes passed. Then she saw Ruiz, just a flicker of movement in the brush near the horses. He moved like water, silent and sure. One by one, he cut the picket ropes. The horses didn't scatter immediately, just stood there, confused about their sudden freedom. Then Ruiz fired his pistol into the air. The horses exploded in every direction, screaming and bucking. The outlaws jumped to their feet, cursing and scrambling for weapons. Chaos, exactly like Mara had wanted. She stood up, silhouetted against the rising sun, and fired 3 shots into the camp. That's far enough, she roared. You're surrounded! Drop your weapons! The outlaws spun toward her voice, trying to find targets. Dutch and Colton opened fire from different positions, making it sound like they had a dozen men instead of 3. In the confusion, Ruiz appeared beside the hostages, cutting their bonds with quick strokes. The woman grabbed her daughter and ran, following Ruiz toward the horses they'd left hidden. One of the outlaws spotted them. He raised his rifle, sighting on the woman's back. Mara didn't think, just acted. She swung her Winchester toward him, compensating for distance and wind in a heartbeat, and fired. The outlaw dropped like someone had cut his strings. The rest scattered, diving for cover, returning fire. Bullets spanged off the rocks around Mara. Dutch grunted, hit, and stumbled back, clutching his shoulder. Fall back, Mara shouted. Now! Colton grabbed Dutch, half carrying him down the backside of the outcrop. Mara fired twice more, keeping the outlaws pinned, then followed. They ran for their horses, mounted in a scramble of limbs and panic, and rode hard. Behind them, the outlaws were shouting, trying to catch their scattered horses, firing wild shots that went nowhere. By the time they got organized enough to chase, Mara's group had a 5-minute lead. It was enough. They rode until the canyon walls closed in too tight for pursuit, then stopped in a narrow defile to catch their breath. Dutch was bleeding steady from his shoulder, but the bullet had gone clean through. Painful, but not fatal. The woman and her daughter clung to each other on Ruiz's horse, both crying, alive, safe. Mara dismounted, her hands shaking now that the danger had passed. She'd killed a man, put a bullet through his chest without hesitation, without thought, just pulled the trigger and watched him fall. Colton appeared beside her. That was impossible, he said quietly. That shot, the distance, the wind, the movement. I've never seen anything like it. Wasn't impossible, just necessary. Mara checked her Winchester, ejecting the spent brass. Her hands were steadier now, always steadied after. Are they going to come after us? Maybe. Probably not. They lost horses, lost a man, lost their hostages. Smart money says they cut their losses and move on. And if they don't? Mara looked at him. The next time I won't aim for their legs. They rode back to the ranch as the sun climbed higher, burning away the morning cool. Behind them, the Badlands stretched empty and indifferent. Ahead, the Double H waited. Safety, work, something that might become home if Mara let it. She wasn't sure yet if she would. But for the first time in a long time, she wasn't sure she wouldn't either. That had to mean something. The news spread through the ranch before they even reached the main house. Someone must have spotted them coming. 4 riders plus 2 extra on horseback. Dutch slumped and bleeding, a woman and child who hadn't been there when they left. By the time Mara dismounted in the yard, Harrow was already on the porch, Eliza beside him, and Pike was running toward them with a medical kit. Get Dutch to the house, Mara said, sliding off her mare. Bullet went clean through, but he's lost blood. Pike and another hand helped Dutch down from his horse. The old man's face was gray, his shirt soaked dark red, but he was conscious and swearing steadily, a good sign. "I'm fine," he kept saying, "just a scratch. I've had worse falling off a horse." "Shut up and let them help you," Mara said. She turned to the woman and child, both still mounted on Ruiz's horse, both looking terrified. "You're safe now. Mr. Harrow will see you taken care of." The woman nodded but didn't speak, just held her daughter tighter. Harrow came down from the porch, his eyes moving from Dutch to the woman to Mara. "How many?" "8. Lost 1. The rest scattered when their horses bolted." Mara started unsaddling her mare, needing something to do with her hands. "They won't come here. Too many witnesses, too much risk." "You sure about that?" "Sure enough." She pulled the saddle off, her arms shaking from exhaustion she hadn't let herself feel until now. "If they do, we'll handle it." Harrow studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Get cleaned up. We'll talk after." He walked back toward the house, already organizing care for Dutch and the rescued woman. Efficient, calm. The kind of man who didn't fall apart when things went wrong. Mara respected that. Colton appeared at her elbow. "You okay?" "I'm standing. That's okay enough." She led her mare toward the barn, Colton following. "You did good out there. Kept your head, followed orders, didn't freeze up." "I was scared the whole time. Everyone was. You just didn't let it stop you." She started brushing down the mare, working in long strokes that the horse leaned into. "That's the difference between living and dying out here." "Is it always like that? The shooting, the running, the—" He stopped. "I keep seeing him fall. The man you shot." Mara's hands paused for just a moment. "Yeah, you will for a while. Maybe forever. That's the cost. How do you deal with it?" "I remember why I pulled the trigger. He was about to shoot a woman in the back, a woman running with her child. I didn't have time to aim for his leg or his shoulder. I had 1 second to stop him or watch him kill someone." She looked at Colton. "I made the choice I could live with. That's all you can do. You make it sound simple. It's not. But overthinking it doesn't help either." She went back to brushing. "Go check on Dutch. Make sure Pike's not letting him drink whiskey while he's being stitched up." Colton left. Mara finished with the mare, then took care of Colton's horse and Ruiz's. By the time she was done, the sun was setting and her whole body felt like it had been beaten with hammers. She walked back to her line shack, stripped off her bloody shirt, and washed using water from the basin. The water turned pink, then red, then clear again as she scrubbed away the day. When she was clean, she sat on the edge of her bunk and let herself shake. She'd killed a man today. Put a bullet through his chest from 100 yards, threading the needle between rocks and wind and the chaos of battle. The kind of shot most people would call impossible. The kind of shot that would have haunted her if she'd missed, but she hadn't missed, and that was its own kind of haunting. There was a knock at the door. Mara pulled on a clean shirt before answering. Eliza stood outside holding a covered plate. "I brought you dinner. Thought you might be too tired to walk to the house." "That's thoughtful. Thanks." Mara took the plate. Beef, beans, cornbread, still warm. "Can I come in?" Mara wanted to say no, wanted to be alone with her exhaustion and her thoughts. But she stepped aside instead. "It's not much. It's perfect." Eliza looked around the small space, the neat bunk, the stove, the single shelf with Mara's few possessions. "This is exactly the kind of place I'd want if I could choose for myself." "Why can't you?" "Because I'm the rancher's daughter. I'm supposed to live in the big house, wear nice dresses, smile at visitors, maybe marry someone respectable who can help run the ranch when my father gets too old." She sat on the only chair, her expression bitter. "I'm supposed to be decorative." Mara sat on the bunk, balancing the plate on her knees. "You don't strike me as the decorative type." "I wasn't always. Used to ride all day, help with branding, get dirty and not care. Then my mother died when I was 15, and my father decided I needed to be a lady. Hired tutors, made me learn piano and embroidery and how to pour tea properly." She laughed without humor. "I hate tea. So stop pouring it. It's not that simple." "It is exactly that simple. You're a grown woman. You want to ride and get dirty? Do it. Who's going to stop you?" Eliza was quiet for a moment. "What happened out there today? With those outlaws?" "Colton told me you saved a woman and her daughter. He said you made a shot that shouldn't have been possible." "It was possible, just difficult." "He also said you killed a man without hesitation." Mara set down the plate, suddenly not hungry. "That bother you?" "No, that's what bothers me." Eliza leaned forward. When those men took us from the stagecoach, when they had us tied up and were deciding what to do with us, all I could think was how helpless I was, how useless. I'd spent my whole life learning to be a lady, and none of it mattered. The embroidery, the piano, the proper way to address a senator, none of it helped me survive. You survived anyway, because you came, because you knew what to do, because you were strong enough and skilled enough and brave enough to do what needed doing. She met Mara's eyes. I want to be like that. I want to be someone who doesn't need rescuing. Being like me isn't as great as you think. Maybe not, but it's better than being helpless. Eliza stood. Teach me more. Not just tracking, everything. How to shoot like you did today. How to fight. How to survive without depending on anyone else. Mara studied her. Eliza was serious. Not a girl playing at toughness, but a woman who'd seen darkness and decided to become sharper because of it. All right, Mara said, but it won't be easy, and your father might not approve. My father doesn't get to decide anymore. I do. After Eliza left, Mara ate her dinner cold and thought about what it meant to teach someone not just skills, but a way of being. She'd taught the ranch hands to track and shoot and survive, but what Eliza was asking for was different, deeper. She wanted to reshape herself into something harder. Mara understood that. Had done it herself, years ago, when she realized the world would never make space for her the way she was. She'd learned to take up space anyway, to demand respect instead of hoping for it. It was exhausting work, and it never really ended. The next morning, Dutch was sitting up in bed looking pale but alive. Pike had done good work. The wound was clean and stitched, and Dutch's color was already improving. Heard you're taking requests for your next rescue mission, he said when Mara came to check on him. I'd like fewer bullets next time. I'll see what I can do. Mara pulled up a chair. How you feeling? Like I got shot. But I've been shot before. I'll live. He shifted, wincing. That woman and her girl, they still here? Yeah, Harrow's arranging transport to Red Creek. She's got family there. Good. Dutch was quiet for a moment. That shot you made, I've been thinking about it. The distance, the angle, the fact that everyone was moving, I've never seen anything like it. Hell, I've never heard of anything like it. Just got lucky. No. Luck is hitting a target when you're aiming somewhere else. What you did was skill. He looked at her directly. You're wasted out here, you know that? You should be somewhere important, teaching soldiers, working for the government, something bigger than babysitting cattle. Cattle don't judge me. Governments do. Fair point. He settled back against his pillow. Still, that was something to see. Made me proud to ride with you. Mara felt something tighten in her chest. Pride. Recognition. The kind of thing she'd stopped expecting from people a long time ago. Thanks, she said quietly. That means something. Yeah, well, don't let it go to your head. You're still a pain in my ass, she smiled. Get some rest, old man. The days that followed fell into a new rhythm. Mara continued training the ranch hands, but now she added Eliza to the roster. The young woman learned fast, faster than most of the men. She had the kind of focused intensity that came from having something to prove, and she pushed herself harder than Mara would have pushed her. Within 2 weeks, Eliza could track a deer through mixed terrain without losing the trail. Within a month, she could shoot well enough to hit targets at 70 yards with a rifle. She was building calluses on her hands and muscle in her arms, and the fancy dresses stayed in her closet more often than not. Harrow noticed. He cornered Mara one evening outside the barn. What exactly are you teaching my daughter? He asked. What she asked me to teach her, survival skills, self-reliance. She's coming home covered in dust every night. Her hands are rough. She barely speaks to visitors anymore. He paused. She's changing. Yeah, she is. You got a problem with that? Harrow was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. No, I guess I don't. Just takes some getting used to. She was my little girl for a long time. Now she's something else. She's becoming herself. That's not a bad thing. I know. He looked toward the house where lamplight glowed in the windows. Her mother would have liked you, I think. She was tough, too. Didn't take any nonsense from anyone, including me. Eliza gets that from her. Sounds like a good woman. She was. He turned back to Mara. Thank you for what you're doing for her, for all of us. You've made this ranch safer and stronger than it's ever been. Just doing the job you hired me for. You're doing a hell of a lot more than that. He extended his hand. I'm grateful. They shook. Mara felt that tightness in her chest again. Belonging. Mattering. The kind of thing she'd convinced herself she didn't need. Turned out she'd been lying to herself. It was Colton who finally said what everyone else was thinking. They were sitting outside Mara's line shack one evening in late September, watching the sun set in shades of purple and gold. The air had finally started to cool, just a hint of autumn creeping in, a promise that the brutal summer was ending. I need to tell you something, Colton said, and I need you to just listen until I'm done. Can you do that? Depends what you're about to say. I'm serious, Mara. She sighed. Fine. I'm listening. He took a breath. When I first met Eliza, I thought she was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. She was kind to me when nobody else was. Made me feel like I mattered, and I convinced myself that meant something. That maybe if I worked hard enough, proved myself enough, she'd see me as more than just a ranch hand. Colton, let me finish. He stared at the horizon. Then the stagecoach got hit, and she was taken, and all I could think about was saving her. Being her hero, proving I was worthy. He paused. But I wasn't the hero. You were. And watching you, the way you tracked them, fought them, got her out, I realized something. What's that? I never loved Eliza. I loved the idea of her. The idea that someone like her could want someone like me. It wasn't real. It was just easy. A story I told myself because I didn't know what else to want. Mara didn't say anything, just waited. These past few months, riding with you, working with you, learning from you, that's when I figured out what real respect looks like, what real strength looks like. He turned to face her. You don't try to be anything you're not. You don't apologize for taking up space. You just are, and everyone else has to deal with it. That's what I want to be. You're doing fine, Colton. I'm doing better because of you. He hesitated. I talked to Eliza yesterday, told her I was backing off, that I'd confused gratitude with something else, and it wasn't fair to either of us. How'd she take it? She laughed, said she'd figured that out months ago. He smiled. We're friends now, real friends, without all the other stuff complicating it. Good. Friendship's worth more anyway. Yeah. He was quiet for a moment. I also told her about you. Mara went still. What about me? That you're the strongest person I've ever met. That watching you work is like watching someone speak a language I'm just starting to learn. That if I could be half as capable as you, I'd die happy. You told her all that? Yeah. And you want to know what she said? He looked at Mara with something that might have been affection. She said she'd noticed the same thing. That you'd taught her more in 3 months than anyone else had taught her in 20 years. That you were exactly what this place needed. Mara felt her throat tighten. She wasn't good with compliments. Never had been. They always felt like traps, pretty words that would turn into expectations she couldn't meet. But maybe that was just the old fear talking, the old assumption that people only saw her as something to judge, not someone to value. I don't know what you want me to say, she finally managed. You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know. Colton stood, brushing dust from his pants. You've spent your whole life being underestimated. I figure it's time someone told you what you actually are. Which is what? Remarkable. He said it simply, like it was just a fact. Then he walked away toward the bunkhouse, leaving Mara alone with the sunset and her thoughts. She sat there for a long time, watching the sky darken and the stars emerge. Remarkable. Not strong, not tough, not capable, though she was all those things. Remarkable. Like she was something worth remarking on, worth remembering. It had been a long time since anyone had made her feel that way. October brought the first real cold, mornings when frost silvered the grass and your breath came out in clouds. The cattle needed moving to winter pasture, which meant long days in the saddle and longer nights making sure nothing went wrong. Mara worked alongside the ranch hands, no longer just teaching, but doing. She'd become part of the operation now. Not just a hired gun, but someone the ranch actually needed. Dutch deferred to her judgment on where to move the herd. Pike asked her advice on securing the winter line shacks. Even Harrow started including her in planning sessions for next year's operations. She tried not to think too hard about what that meant. About the fact that she'd been here 5 months now, longer than she'd stayed anywhere since her father died. about the fact that when she thought about leaving, her stomach clenched in a way that felt suspiciously like dread. The reckoning came on a cold November morning. Mara was in the barn repairing tack when Eliza found her. The young woman had changed dramatically over the past months. Her face was tanned and lean, her hands scarred from hard work, her whole bearing more confident. She barely resembled the terrified girl who'd been dragged from a stagecoach 6 months ago. "Can we talk?" Eliza asked. "Sure." Mara set down the leather she'd been working on. "What's on your mind?" Eliza sat on a hay bale, picking at the stitching on her gloves. "My father's been talking about expanding, buying the adjacent property, hiring more hands, maybe even starting a horse breeding operation. He wants to make this place into something that'll last generations." Sounds ambitious. It is, and he wants you to be part of it, not just as security, but as a partner. Someone with a real stake in what we're building here. Mara felt her chest tighten. That's generous of him. It's not generosity. It's recognition. Eliza looked up. "You've changed this place, Mara. Made it safer, stronger, better. The hands respect you. My father trusts you. And She stopped, choosing her words carefully. "You've shown me what it means to be strong without apologizing for it. To take up space without asking permission. That's worth more than money." "Eliza, I know you're thinking about leaving. I can see it in your face sometimes when you think no one's watching. That look like you're already halfway gone." She leaned forward. "But I also see the way you've settled in here, the way you've let yourself become part of something. You don't have to leave, Mara. You can stay. Build something that's yours." Mara was quiet for a long time. The truth was, Eliza was right about all of it. She had settled in, had let this place and these people become something that mattered, and the thought of leaving, of going back to the endless drift from job to job, town to town, felt hollow in a way it never had before. "I don't know how to stay," she finally said. "I've been moving my whole life. Staying still feels like giving up. Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe moving is the easy thing, and staying is where the real courage is." "When'd you get so wise?" Eliza smiled. "I learned from the best." That evening, Mara walked out to the ridge overlooking the ranch. The sun was setting behind the western mountains, painting everything in shades of amber and gold. Below, the buildings of the Double H looked small and sturdy, smoke rising from chimneys, lights beginning to glow in windows. She'd built this. Not the physical structures, but the safety and strength that made them meaningful. She'd taught the hands to survive, taught Eliza to be fierce, helped turn a struggling ranch into something that could last. And somewhere along the way, she'd stopped being just a tracker passing through. She'd become something more. Colton found her there, standing in the cold wind. "Thought I might find you here," he said, coming to stand beside her. "Thinking about staying or leaving." "Both." She glanced at him. "How'd you know?" "Because I know you, and I know that look." He was quiet for a moment. "For what it's worth, I think you should stay. Not because we need you, though we do, but because I think you need this. A place that's yours. People who see you for what you are." "And what's that?" "Home." He said it simply. "This could be home, Mara, if you let it." She thought about that word. Home. She'd never really had one, not since her father died. Just places she stayed until she didn't. Just people she knew until she moved on. But this felt different. This felt like something she could build on, something that might last. "Yeah," she said quietly. "Maybe it could." They stood there together as darkness fell and the stars came out, watching the ranch lights glow against the night. And for the first time in as long as she could remember, Mara Vance let herself believe that maybe staying wasn't giving up. Maybe it was just another kind of courage. Winter came hard that year. The first snow fell in early December, blanketing the ranch in white that turned the landscape into something alien and beautiful. Mara stood outside her line shack watching it come down, each flake distinct against the gray sky before it joined the growing accumulation on the ground. She'd seen snow before, plenty of it in the mountains, but this felt different, like she was watching it fall on something that belonged to her. The thought still felt strange. Belonging, ownership, stakes. She'd agreed to Harrow's partnership offer 3 weeks ago, signing papers that made her part owner of a section of land on the northern edge of the property. 500 acres of rough country that nobody else wanted, but it was hers. Legal and binding. The kind of thing you couldn't just walk away from when the restlessness came. Colton had helped her stake out the boundaries, riding the perimeter with surveying equipment borrowed from town. He didn't say much during those long days, just worked alongside her in comfortable silence. But on the last day, when they'd planted the final marker, he'd turned to her and smiled. "Congratulations," he'd said. "You're a landowner now. That makes you respectable." "Don't count on it," she'd replied. But she'd smiled too. The partnership changed things in ways Mara hadn't anticipated. The ranch hands treated her differently now, not with the wary respect of hired muscle, but with the easy familiarity of someone who was in it for the long haul. They asked her opinion on things that had nothing to do with security. Invited her to meals in the bunkhouse. Started calling her by her first name instead of ma'am. It should have made her uncomfortable. Instead, it felt like finally being allowed to breathe. The snow kept falling through December and into January. The ranch slowed down during winter. Fewer chores, longer nights. Time to repair equipment and plan for spring. Mara spent her days winterizing the line shacks, checking on cattle in the remote pastures, and teaching anyone who wanted to learn how to read weather signs and navigate by stars. Eliza was there most days, soaking up every lesson like she was afraid Mara might disappear if she didn't learn fast enough. She'd gotten good with a rifle, could hit targets at 100 yards now, even in wind. But more than that, she'd developed the kind of calm competence that couldn't be taught, only earned through experience. One afternoon in late January, they were tracking a mountain lion that had been harassing the cattle. The trail led them up into rocky country where the snow lay in deep drifts and the wind cut like a blade. "How do you know it went this way?" Eliza asked, studying the ground where Mara had stopped. "See that scrape on the rock? Fresh. And the snow's been disturbed here. Something big moved through recently." Mara pointed to a depression in the snow 20 feet ahead. "There. That's a paw print. Lion. Definitely. Big one." They followed the trail for another hour before Eliza spoke again. "Can I ask you something personal?" "You will anyway." "Do you ever regret it, staying here instead of moving on?" Mara thought about that. The truth was complicated. There were days when the old restlessness still hit, when she looked at the horizon and felt the pull to just start riding and not stop. Days when the responsibility of ownership felt like a weight around her neck. Days when she wondered if she'd made a mistake. But those days were getting rarer. "Sometimes," she said honestly, "but regret's a useless emotion. You make a choice, you live with it. Second-guessing doesn't change anything." "That's not really an answer." "It's the only answer I've got." Mara stopped, studying the tracks ahead. The lion had doubled back, circling around a rocky outcrop. Smart animal. "What about you? You regret learning all this, giving up the dresses and tea parties?" "Not for a second." Eliza's voice was firm. "I was suffocating before. Now I can breathe. That's worth everything I gave up." They found the lion an hour later, sunning itself on a flat rock above a ravine. It was massive, probably 200 pounds, with a scarred face and one torn ear. An old male, past his prime, but still dangerous. "We could kill it," Eliza said quietly, her rifle already in her hands. "We could," Mara agreed. "Or we could scare it off, send it deeper into the mountains where the cattle don't graze." "Which would you do?" "Depends on what kind of person I wanted to be that day." Mara studied the lion. It hadn't seen them yet. "Killing's easy. Living with what you kill is harder." They scared it off with warning shots and loud noises. The lion fled into deeper country, and they rode back to the ranch as twilight fell and the temperature dropped below freezing. "Thank you," Eliza said, as they unsaddled their horses in the barn. "For what?" "For not making me choose. For showing me there's more than one way to be strong." Mara didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded and went back to work. Spring came late, breaking through winter in fits and starts. The snow melted, turning the ground to mud that sucked at boots and wagon wheels. Then the grass came back, greener than Mara had ever seen it, and the cattle grew fat on new growth. Harrow made good on his expansion plans. He bought the adjacent property, another 2,000 acres, and hired 6 new hands to help work it. The ranch was growing, becoming something bigger than just a family operation, something that might actually last. Mara found herself in the middle of it all, not by choice, but by necessity. The new hands needed training, the new land needed scouting, and Harrow relied on her judgment for decisions that affected everyone. It was exhausting and exhilarating and terrifying in ways she hadn't expected. One evening in April, she was sitting with Colton outside the main house, watching the sun set. They'd just finished a brutal day moving cattle to fresh pasture, and every muscle in Mara's body was screaming. "You ever think about what comes next?" Colton asked. "Next how?" "After this. After we've built this place into something that works." "What then?" Mara was quiet. The truth was, she'd been thinking about that a lot lately. She wasn't getting younger. Her knees hurt more than they used to. Her back complained when she slept on hard ground. The work that had come easy 5 years ago took longer now. "I figure I keep doing this until I can't," she said. "Then I find something else." That's a depressing way to look at it. It's realistic. What if there was another option? Colton turned to face her. What if instead of doing this alone until you can't anymore, you did it with someone? Built something together that could outlast both of you? Mara felt her chest tighten. "Colton, I'm not talking about romance," he said quickly. "I know that's not what this is. But partnership? Real partnership. The kind where two people build something neither could build alone? That could work. We're already partners. Harrow made it official." "I mean something different. Something more." He hesitated. "I've been saving money. Got enough now to buy a small piece of land, maybe start my own operation. But I don't want to do it alone. And I don't want to do it with anyone else." "You asking me to go into business with you?" "Yeah, I am." Mara stared at him. A year ago, she would have laughed at the idea, would have told him he was crazy for wanting to tie himself to someone like her. But now, sitting here after a year of working side by side, of learning to trust and be trusted, the idea didn't seem crazy at all. "Let me think about it," she said. "Take your time." He stood, brushing dust from his pants. "Just know the offer's there. No pressure, no expectations, just two people who work well together, building something that matters." He walked away, leaving Mara alone with the sunset and her thoughts. The offer gnawed at her for weeks. She tried to push it aside, focus on the work, but it kept coming back. The idea of building something permanent, something that would outlast her body's ability to do hard labor, something that meant she wouldn't die alone and forgotten in some boarding house, another tracker who'd worked herself to death for other people's gratitude. It scared her, the commitment of it, the vulnerability. But it also called to something deep inside her that she'd been ignoring for too long. The part that was tired of being alone, tired of proving herself over and over, tired of the endless drift. She talked to Dutch about it one evening while he was mending fence. "You asking for advice or permission?" he asked, hammering a nail with steady strikes. "Neither, just talking." "Well, here's what I think. You've spent your whole life being what other people needed, tracker, protector, teacher. Maybe it's time to be what you need." He looked at her. "What do you need, Mara?" She thought about that, really thought about it. "I need to matter," she said quietly. "Not just for what I can do, but for who I am." "Then there's your answer." Dutch went back to hammering. "Colton sees who you are, respects it, values it. Not many people in this world will do that. You find someone who does, you hold on to them." "It's not that simple." "It is exactly that simple. We make it complicated because complicated feels safer than vulnerable, but simple is usually right." Mara helped him finish the fence in silence, thinking about simple versus complicated, vulnerability versus safety, and what it meant to build a life instead of just surviving one. She gave Colton her answer on a warm evening in May. They were sitting by the creek that ran through the northern section of Mara's land, watching the water flow past in the fading light. Mosquitoes buzzed in the cattails. A heron stood in the shallows, waiting for fish. "I've been thinking about your offer," Mara said. Colton tensed slightly. "And?" "I want to do it, but I need to be clear about something first." She turned to face him. "I'm not easy to work with. I'm stubborn and impatient, and I don't explain myself well. I'll probably make decisions you disagree with, and I won't always listen when you tell me I'm wrong." "I know all that, and I can't promise I won't get restless. Can't promise I won't wake up one day wanting to ride away from all of this and never look back." "I know that too." He met her eyes. "But I also know you're the most capable person I've ever met. The most honest. The strongest. And I'd rather build something with you, knowing you might leave, than build something safe with someone else." Mara felt something crack open in her chest. Not breaking, opening. "Okay," she said, "let's do it." They shook hands like business partners, sealing a deal that would change both their lives. Then they sat by the creek until full dark, planning what they'd build and how they'd build it. Two people who'd found in each other what they'd been missing alone. The years that followed weren't easy. Building a ranch from scratch on hard land with limited money was brutal work. There were droughts that killed the grass and winters that killed the cattle. There were broken bones and failed crops, and months when they survived on beans and little else. There were arguments that lasted for days, and silences that lasted for weeks. But there were also victories. The first year they turned a profit, Mara and Colton stood in the middle of their land and just looked at what they'd built. A small house, sturdy and weather-tight, corrals and a barn, 50 head of cattle and a dozen horses. It wasn't much compared to the Double H, but it was theirs. Every nail, every fence post, every hard-won acre. "We did it," Colton said, his voice full of wonder. "We're still doing it," Mara corrected. "This doesn't end, we just keep building." "Yeah," he smiled. "But we're doing it together." The Double H continued to grow, and Harrow brought Mara in on more decisions. She helped him negotiate land purchases, advised on hiring, trained new hands. Eliza took over more of the ranch operations, proving herself as capable as any man. Within 5 years, she was running the place while her father focused on expansion. Dutch retired eventually, his body finally giving out after decades of hard work. He moved into a small house in Red Creek but visited the ranch often, always full of advice and complaints. He died in his sleep at 73, and they buried him on a hill overlooking the land he'd helped build. Mara spoke at his funeral, standing in front of more people than she'd ever addressed at once. "Dutch taught me that toughness isn't about never getting hurt," she said, her voice carrying across the gathering. "It's about getting hurt and keeping going anyway. He got shot, and he made jokes while they stitched him up. He got old, and he kept working until his body wouldn't let him anymore. He never quit, never gave up. That's the kind of strength that matters." She paused, looking at the faces around her, ranch hands and neighbors and people from town, people who'd come to respect her not despite who she was, but because of it. "We all get judged by what people see," she continued, "our size, our gender, our appearance. But Dutch taught me that what matters is what you do when nobody's watching, how you treat people, how you face hardship, whether you quit or keep going." She looked at Colton standing beside the grave. He kept going. We should all be so strong. Time kept moving, indifferent and relentless. Mara's hair went gray, then white. Her hands became gnarled with arthritis. She couldn't ride for hours anymore without her back seizing up, couldn't track through rough country without needing rest. Her body was finally catching up with the years of punishment she'd put it through, but she'd built something that would outlast her body. The ranch she and Colton had started with, nothing now sprawled across 5,000 acres. They ran 200 head of cattle and bred horses that sold across 3 states. They employed a dozen hands year-round, more during busy seasons. And they'd done it together, 2 people who'd both been underestimated their whole lives, proving that strength came in forms people didn't always recognize. Colton had married eventually, a widow from Red Creek with 2 grown children. Not a grand romance, but a solid partnership built on respect and companionship. He and Mara remained business partners and friends, their bond deepened by years of shared struggle and success. Eliza never married. She ran the Double H with fierce competence, expanding it into one of the largest operations in West Texas. She visited Mara often, still asking questions, still learning. The frightened girl from the stagecoach was long gone, replaced by a woman who commanded respect through capability and courage. On a warm evening in late summer, when Mara was 65 and feeling every year of it, Eliza came to visit with news. They sat on the porch of Mara's house, larger now than the original cabin, but still modest, drinking coffee and watching the sunset. "I've been asked to speak at the Cattlemen's Association meeting," Eliza said, "about ranch management and security. They want me to talk about how we've kept the Double H safe all these years." "You should do it." I told them I would, but I also told them they needed to hear from you, from the person who actually built the system we use. Eliza looked at Mara. "Will you come? Will you speak?" Mara's first instinct was to say no. She'd never been comfortable with attention, with people looking at her and judging. But then she thought about all the years she'd spent proving herself, all the times she'd been underestimated, All the young women out there who were being told they couldn't because of how they looked. "Yeah," she said. "I'll come." The meeting was held in Fort Stockton in a hall packed with ranchers and businessmen. Mara stood at the podium in her best clothes, which weren't very good, and looked out at the sea of faces. Most were men. Most looked skeptical. She smiled. She'd seen that look before. "My name is Mara Vance," she began, "and for the past 30 years, I've been proving people wrong." That got their attention. "When I started tracking, people told me I was too slow, too soft, too much of a woman to do real work. They looked at me and saw limitations." She paused. "They were wrong. Not because I'm special, but because they were looking at the wrong things." She talked for 20 minutes about tracking, security, survival, about reading the land and reading people, about building systems that worked because they were based on reality, not assumptions, about teaching others and learning from them. But mostly, she talked about strength. "Everyone in this room has been judged," she said. "Maybe for your size, your age, where you came from, what you look like, and you've probably spent a lot of time proving those judgments wrong. That's exhausting. I know because I've done it every day of my life." She looked around the room, meeting eyes. "But here's what I learned. Real strength isn't about fitting into other people's expectations. It's about knowing who you are and refusing to apologize for it. It's about doing the work that needs doing, regardless of whether anyone thinks you can. It's about building something that matters and not caring whether people thought you should." She paused. "I'm a big woman, always have been. People see that and make assumptions. But I've tracked criminals through country that killed better men. I've rescued hostages from armed outlaws. I've built a ranch from nothing on land nobody wanted, not despite who I am, but because of it. My size gives me strength. My experience gives me wisdom. My stubbornness gives me resilience." She leaned forward. "Whatever people see when they look at you, use it. Make it your strength instead of your weakness. Prove them wrong not by changing who you are, but by being exactly who you are with such ferocity that they have to recognize it." When she finished, there was silence, then applause. Not polite applause, real applause, the kind that meant something. Afterward, a young woman approached her, maybe 20, with rough hands and determined eyes. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for saying what you said. I've been told my whole life I'm too big to be a lady. Hearing you talk about making that a strength instead of a weakness, that meant everything." Mara looked at this young woman and saw herself 30 years ago, full of doubt and determination in equal measure, ready to prove the world wrong, but not sure how. "You'll do fine," Mara said. "Just keep going. That's the secret. Don't quit. Don't apologize. Just keep going." The years continued their relentless march. Mara trained her last group of ranch hands at 70, teaching them everything she knew about survival and strength. Her body was failing now. Arthritis had twisted her hands, her back was permanently bent, her knees barely worked. But her mind was sharp, and her voice still carried authority. Colton's health failed before hers. He died at 72 of a heart attack, going quickly and without pain. Mara spoke at his funeral too, standing with her cane and her white hair and her weathered face. "Colton Reed taught me that strength comes in many forms," she said. "He wasn't the fastest or the toughest or the smartest, but he was steady, reliable, true. When he made a promise, he kept it. When he started something, he finished it. That's a rare kind of strength." She paused, her voice rougher now. "We built a ranch together, built a life together. Not as lovers, but as partners. As equals. He never once made me feel small, never once doubted what I could do. In a world that told both of us we weren't enough, we proved we were more than enough. Together." She looked out at the gathering, Colton's wife and stepchildren, Eliza and the ranch hands, people from town, people whose lives had been touched by what they'd built. That's his legacy, not the land or the cattle or the money, but the proof that two underestimated people can build something that lasts, can matter, can leave the world different than they found it. She lived for another 8 years after Colton died. Good years, mostly. Quiet years. She couldn't work anymore, but she sat on her porch and watched the ranch operate without her. Watched new hands learn the skills she'd taught. Watched cattle graze on land she'd claimed from wilderness. Watched the sun rise and set over something she'd built with her own hands and her own stubborn refusal to quit. Eliza visited often, bringing her own protégés, young women she was training the way Mara had trained her, teaching them that strength came in many forms, and they didn't have to apologize for any of them. "You changed my life," Eliza said one afternoon when they were both old women sitting in the shade. "Changed everything I thought I could be." "You changed your own life," Mara corrected. "I just showed you it was possible." That was enough. And maybe it was. Mara Vance died in her sleep at 80, in the house she'd built on the land she'd claimed. They buried her on the hill overlooking her ranch, next to Colton, with a simple marker that read, "Mara Vance Tracker, Teacher, Builder." She kept going, but her real legacy wasn't in stone. It was in the ranch that still operated using her methods, in the women who'd learned from her that they didn't have to be small to be valued, in the men who'd learned that strength came in forms they hadn't recognized, in the countless people who'd been underestimated their whole lives and found in her story the courage to prove the world wrong. Years after her death, a young woman stood at Mara's grave. She'd heard the stories about the tracker who'd rescued hostages, about the impossible shot, about the woman who'd built a ranch from nothing, stories that had become legend in West Texas. But what mattered to this young woman wasn't the legend. It was the simple truth underneath, that you didn't have to fit other people's expectations to matter. That strength came in many forms, and all of them were valid. That being underestimated was only a limitation if you believed it, that you could keep going no matter what the world said about you. She stood there for a long moment, reading the simple words on the marker. Then she turned and walked back to her own life, carrying with her the lesson that had carried through generations. Real courage isn't about being perfect or fitting in. It's about being exactly who you are with such conviction that the world has no choice but to make space for you. Mara Vance had lived that truth every day of her life. And in doing so, she'd proven that the strongest thing any person can be is themselves. The sun set over the ranch that night, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. The cattle grazed peacefully. The horses dozed in their corrals. The land stretched out, indifferent and eternal, bearing the marks of those who'd shaped it without asking permission. And somewhere in all that vastness, Mara's legacy lived on, not as a monument or a statue, but as a simple, powerful truth that passed from person to person, generation to generation. Don't quit. Don't apologize. Just keep going. Everything else will follow.